Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. As previously mentioned, there have been requests for a case including the cryptid known colloquially as Bigfoot. This is an unusual cryptid in which the incidents involving are often just sightings of something big in the woods. But there have been journals from long-term hikers and campers who have had prolonged encounters with these cryptids. There is also one autopsy for a Bigfoot. The mortician who conducted the autopsy was inconsolable for months afterwards. He has recently returned to work, and he has also requested counseling until further notice. Case File: Bigfoot/Civilian, number 011. A weathered-looking journal was found on a picnic table in a large national park. For obvious reasons, the exact location will not be included. Park ranger retrieved the journal, and after trying to find out the identity of the owner, the subsequent report made it to us, where we retrieved the journal and also spoke with the park ranger. The park ranger agreed not to mention anything about this journal. The camper who wrote this journal had gone on a rediscovery adventure. They stated how they hadn't been connected to the outdoors for a period of 8 years and greatly missed the tranquility. Having gone on a sabbatical, they did the appropriate level of research for the area that they were going to. They had gotten equipment to replace old gear, and they did some training to keep fit for long hikes. They spoke with the park rangers and then left, and the details were removed from the relevant databases. The beginning of the journal is a descriptive journey, making mapping in the beginning quite easy. 2 weeks in is the first indication that there was something preternatural afoot. The sense of being watched and the occasional muffled snap of a branch being broken. This went on for around 6 days, and the person did not indicate any trepidation regarding these events. A couple of days after the sense of being watched stopped, the camper detailed an encounter with 2 very gruff-looking men. They had an almost feral look in their eyes, and their presence was intensely unsettling. Their communication was rough, almost punctuated with growls. Their leering gaze made the camper very uncomfortable, and as they took 1 step closer, they both stopped simultaneously. They looked around like kids caught with their hand in the cookie jar. A gasp escaped their lips, and they then bolted away. It wouldn't be until later that the camper would recognize the look and behavior. It was that of a startled prey. The writing is in cursive, and it had been fluent throughout the journal so far. The night of that encounter, the camper noted that instead of feeling refreshed like they normally had since their excursion, they felt mentally exhausted. Careful examination noted that the cursive was not as flowing. For the next week, the fluency of the cursive writing was deteriorating. A block letter was being used in place of it. Repeated mention of a recurring dream. The camper describes the ineffable urge to stand in the middle of the clearing next to a large silhouette of a humanoid. The dream would just consist of the 2 of them standing there for hours on end. And after the aforementioned week, the camper detailed the first proper encounter with a Bigfoot. Or, to be more precise, the Bigfoot from the dream. Exiting their tent to cook an evening meal, the camper noticed the presence immediately. A large humanoid, approximately 9 feet tall, stood half-hidden behind a tree at the edge of the small clearing that the camper was camping in. But instead of fear, the camper felt a sense of serenity. The camper nodded to the Bigfoot and then cooked their meal. The camper had trouble putting into words what happened next, because while he did engage in a form of communication due to the nature of how the conversation took place, putting it into words seemed difficult as 5 pages were filled with writing which was crossed out in multiple occasions. From what could be ascertained, the Bigfoot would telepathically impart the concept of something into the camper's mind, and for this instance, it was the concept of cooking, and not the description of it, but the concept. It seemed a little hazy, as if unsure. The camper then tried to explain vocally about the process of cooking one's food. But the Bigfoot reinforced the idea, and instead of cooking, the focus was on the process of cooking. It took a while, but it seemed that the Bigfoot was looking for an invitation to join the camper for the evening meal. The camper tried to form the image of the two of them sitting together to eat, which the Bigfoot took as the invitation it was meant to be. For around 10 days, this guest would be invited to join for the evening meal, and they would sit and eat. The meat would have to be cooler for the Bigfoot to enjoy properly. The writing was getting thicker, as if the hand writing the information down was heavier than normal. Since the likelihood of the camper gaining such a significant amount of mass to allow this event to occur, the mystery would remain unsolved until the end of the journal. After 10 days, the Bigfoot put forth the concept of community. The camper put forth a sense of city life while shaking his head. The Bigfoot frowned, then sent the concept again, but this time, the focus was on community in the forest with other Bigfoot. After a while, the camper agreed. The belongings were packed and the pair walked off into the woods. It wouldn't be until they got into the location that the Bigfoot was leading him to that the camper noticed that he was finally able to stand eye to eye with his large, quiet friend. 3 more journal entries followed, but the language was very broken English. It was like trying to describe through concepts in as few words as possible. The entry that the morticians found interesting was not the communal aspect of Bigfoot culture, but when the two saw those men, the concept of wrongness, imagined as a black fog with a large red cross in it surrounding those two. And then, an image of an endless corridor of trees like a hellish maze. Small food items like berries were used as the concept for a small amount of food near the bad man's feet with an early sunrise. It was agreed that the Bigfoot, due to their telepathic nature, could cause people to become lost in their forest through telepathic manipulation, and while not violent, did leave enough food for the 2 bad men so they would not die due to starvation. Case File: Bigfoot Autopsy. The Bigfoot in question was found dead in a national park somewhere within the US. Since the park ranger wanted to be vocal about this discovery, he was gaslit into alcoholism, which, given his family background, took little effort. The Bigfoot was 9.5 feet tall. His mass weighed at around 380 pounds. There was very little fat, and the mortician who conducted the autopsy noted that the hair was soft to touch and the skin was tough to cut through. Preliminary examination showed significant injuries to the torso and the arms. Scratch marks indicated a skinwalker due to the variety of necrotizing fasciitis in the wounds. What was startling was that there were antibodies for the infections, preventing any decomposition. The musculature was incredibly dense, as was the bone structure. The killing blow seemed to be when the claws of the skinwalker penetrated the heart. There were no adrenal glands within the Bigfoot, nor were there any reproductive organs, but judging by the above-mentioned journal, it seems that these cryptids can infect others, but only the ones that they choose. I would state that Bigfoot are a higher form of cryptid, and while their communicative abilities are unique, They have shown to be capable of communicating with others, and their ability to show mercy when they could have easily killed those men indicates a higher level of communicative awareness. Mothman. Research in popular culture indicates that this winged cryptid is an omen, mainly connected with ill fortune. Correlations between alleged Mothman sightings and disasters seem to indicate this. There are not many cases involving the Mothman in these archives, mainly due to the fact that this deals with the dead people directly caused by cryptids or other unexplained events. Since the Mothman does not kill, this greatly reduces the amount of information that is able to be accrued. There are some journals of Mothman events described by those who have seen the cryptid. Case File Mothman/Civilian number 004. Journal of a 15-year-old girl. Most of the contents are that you would normally find inside a journal of a teenage girl who still kept up with this tradition. The entries of interest in regard to the Mothman are very few. The first entry describes a walk the girl took through a wooded area near her school. She notes how she is confident walking through the woods by herself due to her being athletic. She has also had several years of wilderness experience. The walk was supposed to be about 3 hours, but approximately 40 minutes into this walk, the girl spotted a dead deer with circular holes in the chest area. She looked around for any signs of a hunter, but this trail was a known walking area, so the chance of a hunter risking the death of an innocent person would be extremely unlikely in her purview. She stood up and continued on her way, and as she was bothered by a feeling that she could not describe, like a light buzzing in her mind, that kept her very vigilant. And after 10 minutes, the girl was brought to a halt when she saw a tall humanoid with wings glaring at her with red eyes. The sight of this monster caused the girl to bolt. The girl would make notes indicating that she was paranoid about this creature. And 2 months later, she would detail her second encounter. This one was more terrifying, as her paranoia had dwindled down slightly, until it landed by her bedroom window. Its glowing red eyes would peer into her room, and seeing this tall monster gaze at her brought her paranoia back. She screamed at it to leave, and when her parents came to investigate, they could not see any signs of the monster she described. This is when things took an unusual turn. When the girl was able to control herself long enough to conduct her own investigation, she noticed some large gouges in the wall and on several trees. She took photos with her cell phone, and her writing became significantly more manic. She would claim to see it more and more. It began to have a deteriorating effect on her sanity, and her parents pulled her from school due to the repeated screams that she would exhibit. Eventually, the girl would be placed into a mental institution, and her suicide occurred 5 years later. Secondary investigation. While some hallmarks of the encounter were similar to the other encounters, the secondary investigation brought to light some intriguing details. First of all, there were no records of a deer carcass found with holes in it along any walking trail. The closest thing was a dead squirrel, which had a singular circular hole in its neck. This was quite decomposed when found, but nothing else found matched the injuries as described. Obviously, the false sightings while she was in public were noted down, but the photos were what drew the attention of the investigators. Out of the 5 working the case, only one of them could see the apparent damage, but going by what the investigator described and what was noted in the journal were almost as conflicting as they were corroborating. The investigator was a known conspiracy theorist who was very fastidious in his investigations, while almost none of them bore fruit. The one leading to his current employment certainly did. This has led to speculation that the apparent correlation leading to the popular belief that Mothman is a harbinger of tragedy could be its ability to cause people to become obsessively paranoid and allow people to look for links that aren't actually there. The parallel theory it is called. Two lines, one denoting tragedies and the other for Mothman sightings. Some dates would mix, but given the population density, the fact that technology is not infallible, and human error is also a leading factor, it could be explained that it is two lines of events not overlaying, but happening to share the same date some of the time. I am unsure of what to make of this myself, and while this sounds like it sort of debunks the Mothman, I think there is a little more to it than that. Imagine being able to turn some of the more observant enemies into a paranoid fool. That wouldn't be believed because the paranoid person no longer fully functions on the same societal norm. Their actions would discredit them, and they would be the boy who called wolf. And while they actually see the wolf, no one else can. It makes no sense to me. I am not sure if it makes any sense to you all, but this is one possible interpretation. The Mothman is an aerial scout unit who is able to disguise itself in paranoid illusions. A scout for who or what is yet to be determined. The second interpretation is that it could be weeding out those vulnerable to the rake. As a cryptid, the rake is able to have a more psychological draining effect on those who are unfortunate enough to encounter it, and the almost nihilistic viewpoints those people suffer could easily have been paranoid illusions instead. But this is just my interpretation of the cases that I have seen and transcribed. Not everyone will agree with me, and that is perfectly fine, but I think that there is a lot more to these cryptid entities and the unusual deaths that are not related to any logical chain of events. And I'm just not sure what that is yet. The rake is a cryptid, feared for the emotional impact it has on its victims. From the cases that I have read, the rake is related to the crawler and the fleshgate. All are pale humanoids whose primary method of locomotion is crawling, and while the crawler and the fleshgate seeking flesh to consume, the rake does not appear to, feeding off of the negative emotions that it can force from others was the main theory of its diet. The various autopsy reports indicate otherwise. Case file: Rake/Civilian, number 083-64. In the western United States, near 3 designated skinwalker territories and 7 suspected Bigfoot domains, a rake cryptid maneuvered its way to a small commune. This was a commune of 4 adults and 5 children. The point of this commune was the return to nature ideology. No cell phones except for an emergency satellite phone. Due to this, most of the information is from the victims themselves, journals and scribbled notes, that and the words the satellite phone was able to record. The commune was self-sufficient. The runners, as the people in charge dubbed themselves, as they were running the commune, were not the first people to notice the presence of the rake. Like a horror movie cliche, it was the youngest, a 4-year-old male. His journal had the word rake randomly dispersed in the writing for 2 weeks. The more alarming journal post was when the boy mentioned his scary friend, the rake, wanted to be let in. So, the boy let his scary friend in. This could have been dismissed as fake, but the eldest daughter wrote an evil thing was sitting on the end of her bed, watching her with hollow eyes. And every so often, it would breathe, But after what felt like hours, it left, and one word appeared in her mind: rake. This repeated for 4 days, but with each successive night, the rake would pour nihilistic thoughts into the eldest daughter. Depression was swift. Journal entries from the parents noted that their eldest daughter was withdrawn and would only mention one thing: the rake is here for us all. The youngest would exclaim that the rake was a friend, but when pressed into revealing his friend, the boy would mumble that it was shy. The eldest son, believing his younger sibling, decided to hunt for the rake. The uncle of the commune accompanied the eldest son. Their bodies wouldn't be recovered until the secondary investigation. Subsequent journal entries indicated that the voices of the two would-be hunters could be heard, but the youngest would block the door and say his scary friend was teasing the commune. When pressed for details, the youngest boy described his scary friend and how he would make him and his elder sister think thoughts of death. The rest of the commune tried to convince the boy, except for the remaining sibling. She would show the sketches that she had been drawing for months, sketches of a pale individual with very long black claws, voids for eyes, and gazing directly at the viewer with an intensity that should be impossible. The last journal entries of the commune, except for the youngest, expressed private concerns, as they all had those feelings of nihilism and of the inevitability of the rake. The youngest boy's last written words were, "I'm sorry." Autopsy 1. Eldest boy. Slashing mark to the calf muscles, cleaving the muscles in two. Presence of adrenaline in the systems indicates that he was in a state of fight or flight. Femoral artery was pierced cleanly, and death was slow due to the smaller puncture wound in the femoral artery. Autopsy 2. Uncle. Deep lacerations to the chest. Wounds to the arms indicate defensive wounds. Autopsy 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Mother, father, middle child, boy, youngest son, eldest daughter, aunt, all found dead, sitting at the dining table. Post-mortem evidence indicates that the bodies were moved after death. Every person sitting at the table showed no outward signs of death. However, when the brain was examined, multiple scars were found throughout the brain, and all the scars were arced, as if in repeated bite marks. The missing child, the youngest daughter. Evidence strongly implicates the daughter as the one who moved the bodies of the family to the inside of the commune dining area. Her fingerprints match 6 pictures placed in front of the appropriate victims on the table. Footsteps of the youngest led out of the commune and disappeared alongside the tracks of the rake. Rake information. The rake is an entity that feeds on induced nihilistic thoughts. People who are naturally nihilistic are immune to the enhancing effects that the rake naturally emits. This is thought to be an extension of the crawler's fear aura. The rake is a humanoid creature that moves on all fours like an animal. Long claws are seen from the forelegs. However, the evidence indicates that the length is a gauge. While the rake does have claws, as evidenced by the hundreds of bodies it has attacked, the length is quite short, but the length is likely to allow the rake to deduce how much nihilism or basic fear that the would-be victim produces. Due to the inherent nature of the rake, firearms have an indeterminable effect, as people are either too scared or too nihilistic to make an attempt. The rake, due to its feeding capabilities, will, when it finds a suitable host, torment the victim with night visits and the aforementioned aura of nihilism. There is a theory that the youngest daughter was taken not for food, but to make another rake. And while this is wholly speculation, it is the best theory that is agreed upon by the majority of morticians. As you can imagine, there were a lot of cases that I had to sort through, and after reading about nihilism aura that the rake apparently projects, I must admit, I do ponder what would happen if I would ever encounter this cryptid, or its variations. Also, finding out if these things can be killed would be helpful knowledge. I do apologize for the lateness of this case, but there were interruptions that required greater attention than normal. Werewolves, or the more encompassing term, therianthropes. Unlike the deplorable representation in the crimes against literature referred to as the Twilight Saga, or as I refer to it, why am I glad I have no emotional connections to people? From the vocal interjections, Teen Wolf would be a far greater viewpoint. Apparently, therianthropes are more like guardians than monsters, and some therianthropes can have their minds twisted by their capabilities. Therianthropy refers to the ability to turn into an animal through an unknown means. Werewolves are the more acknowledged example for this, but apparently, any strong enough connection to a spirit animal and training that differs from person to person, you can actually gain the ability to shapeshift. This shift is to a hybrid form of human and animal, but very rare, therianthropes can shift completely into the animal form, though these are more rare than an honest used car salesman. Before I continue, I will point out that the most morticians that granted me permission have asked that I only archive certain cases involving therianthropes and any victims, but they would rather this be more educational than threatening. I was able to point out that an example of a therianthrope who went blood mad, as they termed it, would be useful. They were not happy, but after several hours of heated discussion, they relented, grudgingly though, but only if I went into great detail about therianthropy and the differences to cryptids like skinwalkers. Like previously mentioned, therianthropy or shifting is different to the few other forms that other cryptids are able to replicate. The closest example is the skinwalker. However, due to the secrecy of Native American shamanistic rituals, we are unable to explain the ritual, and given the levels of stupidity and curiosity people can demonstrate, like Tide Pods, I wouldn't post that information anyway, even if I did possess it. For therianthropy, the training stages allows the shifter to adopt the things like the skin of the animals, the muscles and the speed, but the most tricky aspect is the mentality. Physical changes can be eased into to allow greater control, but the mental changes are the part where shifters can turn feral if the human mind doesn't gain dominance. One of these cases will be used as an example below. However, those who do make the shift successfully, they elect to use their powers to hunt the more dangerous cryptids and play guard duty for the bigger dangers. Though, while these therians were effective in cryptid combat, they couldn't fight them all. The rake has an especially destabilizing effect on therianthropes. The skinwalker trigger a truly heightened fight or flight response, and the fight would be to the death, typically the therian. The common therian forms are wolf, horse, boar, and bear. There are others, but I am asked to mention them only in the relevant case files. The case file that I have chosen, and had to defend my choice for, is one involving the last true werewolf. I have been asked to omit any dates, as there are still hunters out there who are trawling sites like this looking for clues to the therian threat, and they are obsessed with killing therians. Case File, Werewolf/Therian, number 001, Final. Journals and maps indicate the location of where the last true werewolf was eventually killed. The language is not English, but something I was able to get translated. Again, the language is not something I am allowed to disclose. We have been hunting him for the past 6 weeks. His aggressive nature is causing his trail to be easy, but we are patient. We know he is the last. The Inquisition, the Shadow One, has killed many werewolves and eliminated most of the more insidious vampires. But this lichen has proved to be a cunning predator, almost apex. He has avoided the small hamlets in the area. He must be hungry. This makes him even more dangerous. A predator that is hunted, hungry, and desperate. I do not expect any of us to live through this hunt, but his death is required. Therian 2 has informed us that we have found a lair. Tracks and recent kills indicate that it could be the lichens. We spread out and attune our senses to sharpen. There are 5 other Therians, including myself. Therian 4 is a bear shifter. She is looking at the mouth of the lair with an odd expression. Human. The Therian whispered. All our eyes snap at each other. This changes things. A hostage or a snack. Unless we move, the human is dead, and as the hunt leader, I walk into the clearing. I am a wolf shifter. There are 2 boar shifters, the bear shifter, and a horse shifter. The others follow me into the small clearing. The boars were twins, and they nod at me. We know our roles. The boars were to play bait. The horse shifter was a trained healer, and the bear shifter is the main powerhouse. As a wolf, I have an inherent understanding of team leadership. I howl, reaching that primal aspect, issuing a challenge. The others scatter to their positions, and I stand in front of the lair mouth. A growl that seems to shake the entire forest ripples from the lair. It stalked out with their strange strength, and I charged at it. I knew the response. It charged at me. The lichen leaped at me, but I slid along the ground as the boars charged in together, and their tusks barely broke its skin. From this point, the writing would change in style. The language was the same, but the writing is much shakier. It was apex. A lichen reached the pinnacle. We won't survive this fight. The bear charged in with a roar like a volcano, and the blow seemed to shake the very air around us all. The leader started darting in and out, snapping at the hamstrings and other weak points. The boars started to mirror their attacks, aiming from the same spot on the opposite side, if that makes sense. And the fight was the most brutal that I have ever seen. The lichen's claws easily ripped through our flesh, and the bear was greatly wounded, and the hunt leader was missing his throat, still clutched in the lichen's right hand. The surviving boar was being held up in the left hand, and its kicks were getting weaker. I move and I strike, and my kicks are powerful, and I reached out with a kick, and I slam into its throat. I can feel the windbox collapse beneath my hoof. He throws the boar away. A loud crack answers the question I dreaded. I start to dart aside, but with his last few breaths, he managed to slash against my stomach. Then he collapsed. I took the book from the leader, and I have documented the final fight. I am dying, but this needs to be recorded. I'm going to ask the human who is staring at us to get him to hand this journal into a sage. We fought well.
And here are the top comments for my last video. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.